Let me walk you through a quick thought experiment. Imagine a Fortune 500 company, huge balance sheet, thousands of employees, global footprint. Now imagine that company goes through its annual audit like it does every year, and the auditors come back and say, "We couldn't complete the audit. The financial records are too unreliable for us to even do our work and form an opinion." That's not just a bad result, that's the worst possible outcome. It's what us accountants call a disclaimer of opinion, and it basically means the books are such a mess they couldn't tell you whether anything is accurate or not. No opinion, no assurance, just uncertainty. And if this were a public company, the stock would tank, the CEO would be fired, the CFO would be gone, the board would be panicking, investors would bail, and regulators would swarm in. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. This isn't some struggling corporation I'm talking about. This is the United States Department of Defense, the Pentagon, the largest and most heavily funded military organization in the world, and it has just failed its financial audit for the 8th year in a row. 8 straight years, and unlike a company with shareholders, no one gets fired, no one resigns, and no one seems particularly concerned. And that's the part that should worry you. Because from my perspective, this isn't just an accounting failure. This is a flashing red warning, a sign that the system responsible for managing trillions of taxpayer dollars are fundamentally broken. And the worst part, no one's even held accountable. Now, just to be clear, this was an audit of the entire Department of Defense, the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, and all the agencies and operations that fall under it. But most people just say the Pentagon for simplicity, and I will too. And I want to explain why I think this story matters a lot more than you've been told. Hi, I'm Noel Lorenzana. I'm a CPA, and I've worked as an internal auditor for the private sector for several years a while back. What failing an audit actually means. A lot of people see the words audit failure and think it just means someone made mistakes, or worse, that money was unaccounted for. But that's not what this is. Allow me to explain it simply. A financial audit is an independent examination of a company's financial statements to determine whether they are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with the applicable accounting framework. In other words, when an independent auditor reviews a set of financial statements, they're looking to answer one basic question. Can we reasonably rely on these numbers? If the answer is yes, you get a clean or unqualified opinion. If there are some issues, but the numbers still hold up, you might get a qualified opinion. If things are way off, you could get what's called an adverse opinion. But if the records are such a mess that the auditor can't even conduct a proper audit, then that's a disclaimer of opinion. And that's exactly what the Department of Defense just received again. A disclaimer is the audit equivalent of throwing your hands up and saying, "We don't have enough reliable information to express any opinion at all." It means the books are not auditable, not just flawed, but unusable. What does that actually look like? In the case of the DoD audit for the fiscal year 2025, the Office of Inspector General reported, and I quote, "The OIG issued a disclaimer of opinion, meaning the auditors could not obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to support an opinion." In plain English, we couldn't audit this. There were too many gaps, too many unknowns. The auditors couldn't verify the numbers. They couldn't reconcile records. They couldn't confirm whether assets, expenses, or liabilities were properly stated. And we're not talking about a few rounding errors. We're talking about 4.6 trillion in total assets. That's not missing money, but it's money that couldn't be properly supported with documentation or internal controls. And why does that matter? This isn't just a paperwork problem. This is a sign of a deep systemic failure. Incompatible systems, missing records, assets that may exist on paper but can't be physically located, or vice versa. Departments that aren't communicating, and financial systems that don't share information. These are what auditors call material weaknesses. The report on internal controls included 26 of them, and 2 significant deficiencies related to their internal controls over financial reporting. Who actually conducts these audits? Just to clarify, these aren't political hit jobs. These are real internal financial audits overseen by the Department of Defense's Office of Inspector General, using independent public accounting firms who follow the same standards used to audit large corporations. The OIG coordinates the process and signs off on the official audit report. This is about as formal and legitimate as it gets. And how long has this been going on? The Department of Defense has failed its audit every single year since audits began. That's 8 straight years of failures, from the first full audit in 2018 through the most recent one in 2025. And here's the part most people don't even realize. Before 2018, the Pentagon didn't just pass or fail audits, they didn't conduct them at all. Despite the Chief Financial Officers Act of 1990 requiring all large federal agencies to prepare auditable financials, the Pentagon went nearly 3 decades without producing a full auditable financial statement. So this isn't just a recent failure. It's a systemic condition that's only recently come to light. In fact, the Department of Defense remains the only major federal agency that has never passed a full financial audit. The trust problem. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Accounting isn't just about math, it's about trust. Every budget, every bond, every government report, all of it relies on the idea that someone somewhere is keeping track of the money. You trust your employer to pay you, the bank trusts you to repay your loan, bondholders trust the government to be fiscally responsible, and that trust only exists because we assume there's a system underneath, one that can track, measure, and verify what's happening. And that's what audits are for. But when a system this big, the largest organization on earth, managing over 4.6 trillion in assets, tells us we don't know if our own numbers are accurate, that's not just a technical problem. That's a huge crack in the foundation of trust. This isn't some obscure back office glitch. This is the same Department of Defense that spends close to $850 billion a year. They manage overseas operations, procurement, and global security. They shape defense policy for the most powerful nation on earth. And if that level of spending can't be traced or reconciled, how can we really trust anything they tell us about their finances? Think about it. This is the same federal government telling you the deficit is manageable, inflation is under control, the debt ceiling is temporary, the economy is sound. When audits fail year after year with no consequences, complacency sets in. No accountability means no transparency. No transparency means no trust. And once trust is gone, things become uncertain and no one believes the numbers anymore. What history teaches us about financial opacity. History doesn't always repeat itself exactly, but it does leave behind patterns. And if you've studied enough of them, you start to recognize the signs. No major empire collapses because of a single event. They hollow out first. Long before the fall of Rome, the empire had already started rotting from within. The currency was debased. Military spending ballooned. Financial records became unreliable. The cost of keeping the system running outpaced the system's ability to track or sustain itself. By the time the invasions came, the empire had already lost its internal discipline, it just didn't know it yet. The Soviet Union followed a similar path. Enormous military and bureaucratic spending, economic data manipulated for appearance sake, state-run entities operating with no real financial accountability, paper reports full of numbers that made sense politically, but not economically. And for a while it looked like things were fine, until one day they weren't. Because when a system can no longer measure itself, it can no longer correct itself. And once that happens, collapse is no longer a shock. It's a delayed inevitability. Let me be clear. This is not about saying America is going the way of Rome or the Soviet Union. It's about recognizing a common thread in the way large, powerful systems, governments, empires, economies begin to unravel. It always starts with the loss of financial accountability. When budgets stop meaning anything, when audits stop getting passed, and when people stop demanding answers. Why this matters to regular people like you. You might be thinking, okay, Noel, I get it, but this still feels like a government problem. How does this affect me? It's a fair question, but here's the reality. Broken accountability at the top always shows up at the bottom later on. It shows up as inflation. When a system can't track where trillions of dollars are going, it loses the ability to make disciplined decisions. Budgets stop being guardrails and start becoming suggestions. Spending grows unchecked, debt piles up, and eventually prices rise. You feel it at the grocery store, at the gas pump, when your rent goes up but your paycheck didn't. You're not imagining it. When no one's measuring accurately, no one's managing responsibly. It shows up as deficits and debt nobody cares about anymore. Remember when trillion-dollar deficits used to be shocking? Now it barely makes the news. That's what happens when the numbers lose meaning. The government runs continued deficits. The debt ceiling gets raised like clockwork. Nobody can explain how it's sustainable, but we're told not to worry. Meanwhile, interest payments on the debt are at record highs, and our government is spending more on servicing the debt than on entire federal programs. If the institution spending $850 billion a year can't even pass a financial audit, why should the public have any faith in government spending? The real danger isn't scandal, it's normalization. The real threat isn't that the DoD failed one audit, it's that it failed 8 in a row, and the public is starting not to care. We get used to it, we stop expecting better, we shrug and move on. And when we stop expecting accountability, it disappears completely. That's how systems decay, not with some loud dramatic collapse, but with quiet indifference. Let me leave you with this. This isn't about fear, it's not about blame, it's not even about predicting collapse. It's about understanding how systems work and what happens when they stop working. As an accountant, I understand systems, and what I've learned is simple. If a system can't measure itself, then it can't manage itself. And if it can't manage itself, it eventually loses legitimacy. Now, before I go, I just want to say something clearly, especially for those folks who might question my motives. I'm 100% American. No one's paying me to make these videos. I don't have some hidden agenda. I'm not anti-government, not anti-military or law enforcement. Quite the opposite, actually. I make these videos because I care, because I believe truth matters, because I want to help regular people understand what's really going on. Yes, I make a little bit of money doing these videos, but honestly, that's not why I do it. I'm driven by a sense of purpose, by a desire to serve. I'm a Christian and I believe in God Almighty, who I believe works through all of us, especially when we choose to speak honestly, help others, and do what's right. Now, maybe it's a legacy thing. Maybe I'm just trying to farm some karma points, but either way, I believe this work matters, and I'm grateful that you're here watching, thinking, and questioning. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.